Living Power with Dan Hurst.
Now, what are the elements of the opposition that came against him? And when you are dealing with opposition in your life, what are those elements that you're going to be facing? How do you know when you're being opposed? And I want to key in on a few things here that are indicated. And we look at Nehemiah chapter 4, verses 1 and 2. When Sanballat heard that they were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and was greatly incensed. He ridiculed the Jews, and in the presence of his associates and the army of Samaria, he said, "What are those feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring the stones back to life from those heaps of rubble, burned as they are?" I want you to look at this passage, and I want you to key in on some things that we know, some of the elements of opposition in our life. When somebody is opposed to you, or something has happened, there's opposition in your life because you decided that you are going to follow Christ, you are going to be obedient and faithful to Him. One of the things that you'll begin to discover is that you might as well expect anger. There are going to be those who come against you who are angry. Now, Sanballat, more than likely, had other plans for Jerusalem. We don't exactly know what they were, but from the way that he was behaving and the way he was acting, it sounds like he had other plans for Jerusalem. And his response to the situation is a pretty good example of what anger is. Now, I want you to key in on this because this is so important in so many aspects of life. Anger is an emotional response to a lack of control. Anger is an emotional response to a sensed lack of control. In other words, we get angry when something doesn't happen the way that we think it should, or the way that it would if we could control it. You see that in a little child. When does a little child really get mad? When they don't feel like they have control. When something doesn't happen the way they think it should happen. When they are out of control. Well, that is so true. That is the basic element of anger. And it is one of those things that we have to understand as adults that is true in us also. People get angry with us when we do or don't do something that they sense is out of their control. And so there is anger. It is just this response because one feels that one has lost some control. Anger is motivated by a sense of a lack of control over an activity or an event that is important to you. Now, is anger a sin? No. Anger is not a sin. It's an emotion. The issue is what you do with that anger. That can become the sin. In fact, Psalm 4:4 says, "Be angry, but don't sin." Be angry, but don't sin. In other words, anger is an emotion that God He's built you with this emotion of anger. But it's what you do with that anger that determines the sin or not. For some people, it causes a negative, even destructive response. Some people let their anger cause them to behave in such a way that they cause a negative or destructive response. Some people understand what the anger really is, and they're able to control it and respond appropriately. But anger itself is just an emotion. It's what you do with that emotion that determines and defines whether or not you handle it appropriately or whether or not you sinned. In fact, Psalm 37:8 says, "Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Don't fret, it just leads to evil." In other words, don't let the anger just continue. Don't let it just build up in your life. Because if you do, it will eventually lead to evil. You are going to make some choices and some decisions. Listen, when you make choices and decisions from the standpoint of anger, you've made the wrong choice. The word that is used here for Nehemiah, in Nehemiah for Sanballat's anger is a word. It's the word kara. And it is a word that means to burn. In other words, he was consumed by his emotion. He was so consumed by his emotion that his emotion was controlling him. And that meant that he was out of control. He wasn't controlling his emotion was controlling him. People who are controlled by their anger emotion do and say emotional things. May I tell you the way I first wrote that sentence? People who are controlled by their anger emotion do stupid things. They say stupid things. Because when your anger controlled, when you are controlled by that emotion of anger, then you are out of control and your emotion is in control, and emotions make dumb choices. And opposition that is motivated or controlled by anger will do and say emotional things. So, it's important to understand that part of the opposition that's going to come against you is going to be motivated by anger. Be prepared for it. And people who are angry, peoples who are angry, do stupid things. They say stupid things. And you have to expect anger when you are being obedient and seeking to follow the Lord. Now, I have learned in my own experience that even when I have not been following the Lord, that anger comes against me also. And then what's worse is, somebody comes against me, somebody opposes me, and they're angry, then I get angry. Then you have two people who are out of the will of God going at each other. Boy, does that get interesting. That's a fun experience. That happens a lot in marriage. That happens a lot in marriage. Two couples who just kind of let their guard down spiritually, and they let their emotions take control, and then they deal with each other on an emotional level, and that can cause some real problems.